Muy buenas a todos, comunidad, ¿cómo estamos? Hostia, tú, esto está un poco fuerte, un momentín. A ver. Vale. Y esto, que no se detenga. Ok, muy buenas a todos, comunidad, ¿cómo estamos? Pues estamos aquí para reaccionar al vídeo al vídeo stream de Assassin's Creed. Más concretamente, estamos aquí para reaccionar al vídeo de Assassin's Creed, del universo expandido de Assassin's Creed, que estoy aquí, Assassin's Creed Stories Livestream, donde nos van a enseñar todas las movidas que van a venir, imagino que este año y el siguiente, sobre Assassin's Creed. Antes de empezar, quiero decir que quedan 9 minutos, quiero decir que este stream es única y exclusivamente para la historia que tiene que ver con Assassin's Creed, con el universo expandido. O sea, sé, cómics, novelas, tanto escritas como novelas visuales, y creo que ya, web series y quizás algún juego adicional. Yo no creo sinceramente que aquí nos enseñen nada de Infinity ni nada de Valhalla. A lo mejor algún tráiler de Valhalla de los DLC, del Season Pass, o a lo mejor algún tráiler de Valhalla de del Discovery Tour, que son las nuevas cosas que van a venir de Assassin's Creed, pues quizás. Pero os quiero avisar desde el principio que si venís a que si vais a venir a este stream esperando conseguir noticias del universo de Assassin's Creed, de los cómics, de los juegos, no. Aquí van a venir de lo que es el universo expandido de Assassin's Creed. Como he dicho, novelas, cómics, novelas visuales y todo lo demás. Dicho pues, tengo interés por saber si presentarán nuevas cosas o si simplemente expandirán las ya conocidas, porque hay sobre todo una historia que me llama la atención, que es una, creo recordar que es una duología de historias, y es que no recuerdo cómo es el nombre, pero creo que es en la época del Assassin's Creed 3, o creo que un poquito antes de Assassin's Creed 3, donde manejas a un nativo. Pero no un nativo, pero no a un nativo ni como en Assassin's Creed 3, ni como por ejemplo en Valhalla, sino creo que es un nativo puro, un nativo 100%. Un poco como el DLC. Y por cierto, la música, tío. La música están metiendo ahí todas las de Assassin's Creed 2. Siempre hacen lo mismo. Es como que no tienen confianza en otros BCOs. En todas las presentaciones está la BCO de Assassin's Creed 2. Y es como, wow, 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 wow. 7 minutos. Vale. Miraré yo de mientras Twitter. Vale, esto está grabando. Bueno, como aún no está empezado, pues este vídeo seguramente lo subiré sin editar, porque como tenga que editar el vídeo este, que va a ser de 1 hora, o casi de 1 hora, aquí nos dicen de todo lo que va a hablar, que creo que aquí no van a presentar nada nuevo, o sea que solo nos van a anunciar lo ya presentado. Bueno, yo a mí es que me interesa, o sea, el universo expandido de Assassin's Creed me interesa, ¿no? A fin de cuentas yo mismo tengo un universo expandido de historias, de fanfics, que lo estoy ahí montando, y que por ese tema, por cierto, ahora que es como un sitio adecuado, ¿qué ha pasado con el universo expandido de historias tuyas? ¿Qué ha pasado con las historias de mi canal? Pues bueno, realmente lo que ha pasado es que estoy trabajando en algunas historias y estoy pensando bien cómo empezar, pero realmente es más falta de tiempo o proyectos que tienen que salir antes, pero la cosa sigue igual. Estoy preparando anunciadas para salir. Tengo para dentro de poco el Dread Operation de Assassin's Creed con Drake, que es un personaje que ni siquiera que presente una imagen. Que no sé por cierto si podré poner alguna imagen por aquí mientras espero. A ver. Vale. Creo recordar que puedo poneros una imagen por aquí de lo que sería la portada de Dread Operation. Aquí está. Esto es. Esto es de Dread Operation. Que esto es un crossover que estoy preparando para mi universo expandido, que ya presentaré más cosas. Pues tengo ese y también tengo la crisis en el mar, que es como el importante, ¿no? El crossover importante. Y eso es lo que tengo por el momento ahí preparado. Tengo también otras historias, pero son más one shot, son más historias cortas. Así que por el momento va con eso. Y evidentemente las historias que yo presenté en un principio de cómo pueden ser, pues el fanfic que primero que hice, ¿no? De Mike, de Groner Longbay, que es como el primer, que ese lo tengo que remasterizar porque está demasiado mal. Le voy a dar una vuelta de hoja y una que tengo bastante ganas es la historia de Ligia, ¿no? De Plague Doctor, que también lo presenté en el anuncio. Que si queréis saber más concretamente, pues podéis ver el anuncio que tengo por mi canal y podréis ver todo lo que es todo el anuncio. Y bueno, vamos pues a centrarnos en el universo canon, no en mis universos inventados, y vamos pues a ver qué nos presentan. Tengo ganas, tío, de ver este vídeo y no sé si seré el único de los que solemos subir a Assassin's Creed, no sé si seré el único que coja y haga una reacción al proyecto, no sé si seré el único que haga una reacción o si algunos de mis compañeros, Arby no creo, porque Arby está últimamente el pobre pasando problemas, si lo seguís en Twitter pues lo sabéis. Pero no sé yo si Rip, que es Rip, creo que le mola el rollo del universo expandido. Creo que Rip igual sí hace alguna reacción. Igualmente, por cierto, un saludo Rip y Albi, ánimo güey, que todo mejora, ya verás. Y bueno, 3 minutitos que estamos, 3 minutos. Estoy emocionado, aunque no es una cosa, bueno, sí es principal, pero no es una cosa de los juegos. Y estoy emocionado, ¿sabes? Estoy con ganas de ver qué nos pueden anunciar, aunque no me espero tampoco aquí, wow, ¿sabes? Pero si anuncian lo ya, si presentan lo ya anunciado, quiero saber si van a coger y van a anunciar ya cosas de la historia de Assassin's Creed Black Flag, de la continuación. Que la continuación de Black Flag es algo que se sacaron ahí del nabo, ¿sabes? Hicieron ¡paz! Rabazo. Y no han vuelto a decir nada más sobre eso. Y me gustaría saber, tío, qué pueden anunciar, ¿sabes? Me gustaría saber qué pueden anunciar sobre Black Flag, la verdad. Me interesaría bastante. 2 minutitos. Bueno, pues yo voy a seguir mirando aquí cosas. Evidentemente, por cierto, hoy jueves, este es el vídeo que voy a subir, que lo voy a subir cuando acabe en una hora, pues es el que voy a subir. Hacen que evidentemente hoy jueves no se va a tener, ¿sabes? Uy, disculpen. Uf. No se va a tener, pues, vídeos. Esto va a ser el vídeo que voy a subir. Hostia, la música. Oh, el tema de Venecia, buenísimo. Tin, 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 tin. Este tema es la hostia. Un minuto. La tipografía, por cierto, no sabría decir cómo es exactamente. El fondo me encanta, en serio. O sea, estos fondos así en rollo Animus de Assassin's Creed 3 me flipan un montón. Bueno, no sabría si considerarlo de Assassin's Creed 3 o no. Pero me gustaría que el fondo fuera blanco, más que negro. Porque Assassin's Creed siempre ha utilizado el Animus blanco. El Animus negro eran para situaciones especiales, como por ejemplo Black Flag, Revelation, o sea, no, Black Flag lo tenía verde. Para casos como Revelation, como Origins, ¿no? El Animus de Origin, por cierto, me parece posiblemente el mejor Animus. Aunque me hubiera gustado ver cómo eres de Odyssey, porque toda la estética de Odyssey mola bastante. Me gustaría saber cómo hubieran imaginado el Animus la Black Room, ¿no? Del Animus en Origins, la verdad. Igual, tío, si le pregunto a Ubisoft. Pero bueno, 9, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Comenzamos. Empezamos con tráiler, pero la música sigue, tú.
Hello everyone, I am Dan St. Germain, Community Manager on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and today I have the awesome opportunity to sit down with some of the writers, editors, and organizers behind Assassin's Creed stories. Everything from novels and comics,
Este señor es el que se va a encargar de Assassin's Creed Stories.
all this and more falls under the umbrella of Assassin's Creed stories, and today we're going to have a chat with some of the creators of these stories. Our first guest today is one of the masterminds behind Assassin's Creed stories, Etienne Bouvier. Etienne, tell us who you are and what it is you do, please.
Hey Dan, hey everyone. My position at Ubisoft is that of
Mucha sangre nueva, ¿eh?
manager, which means that I oversee and coordinate
Bueno, se nota que es fan.
our publishing and transmedia
Tiene hasta el libro tiene hasta la historia del libro que eres un
live
asesino, tío.
audio series as well, between our external partners, publishers,
Bueno,
writers,
bueno,
illustrators also,
bueno.
and our internal creative partners here at
A ver,
Ubisoft.
es que...
creative teams within the
Por cierto,
studios,
mierda, ya no lo puedo enseñar. Ha salido el libro que yo os estaba diciendo.
That's a pretty wide net of everything that you cover. When it comes to Assassin's Creed transmedia stories, where can they be found exactly?
We now have one
Aquí está.
destination for our fans to find the
No se ve ratón. Bueno, ¿veis que en un lado tiene una historia azul con una lanza? La han quitado. Bueno, el libro con la portada azul y una lanza. Con dos personajes. Fragment, Assassin's Creed Fragment.
Our illustrated projects, our digital projects, art books, etc. It's finally the one and only destination on which all the information will be available for fans to better navigate between all the transmedia projects that we launch. And there's a lot. We have inserted on this page also all the old transmedia projects, those that were launched in the previous 10 years, so that you can have a complete history of what was made in terms of transmedia on the Assassin's Creed franchise.
And so, what sort of stories or settings do these various works cover? You know, we've got now 10 years of different stories. What's the breadth of all these?
Well, Dan, we cover very different genres with this transmedia program. We have traditional fiction formats, which our fans are very familiar with. Obviously, these are the novels, the graphic novels here in France, the comics in the US, but also the mangas in Japan. It's an important part of our transmedia development, of course, and we will go on developing these kind of projects. But more and more today, we also have digital formats. We have been lucky.
¿Qué parece que está leyendo, tío? Es inexpresivo, tío. Avalacen. Hola, gente, ¿cómo estáis? Joder, macho. No digo tampoco que sea aquí, ¿sabes? Actor, pero yo que sé, un poco de salero español, ¿no? Salero andaluz.
We have many different other digital projects in the making at the moment. We have webtoons, you have seen that. We also have
a mí solo me interesa el webtoon realmente. Bueno, y Fragment.
Tell you a bit more about Assassin's Creed Dynasty. Assassin's Creed Dynasty was at first a Chinese webcomic developed only to be launched on digital platforms in China. We associated with Chu Tianjie, the author of Blade of the Guardians, which was read more than 1 billion times in China, to develop this epic story set during the Tang Dynasty, where a brand new assassin, Li He, is trying to basically save this dynasty from civil war. The project was at first digital only, Chinese language only, but it was so successful and we saw so much potential for this project that we found traditional publishing partners across the world to launch the webcomic localized in different languages in traditional paper.
Ah, mira, lo van a traducir y traer en diferentes idiomas. Por Dios, que lo traigan a España. Dynasty es una de las cosas que más me interesan.
Digital to traditional publishing and to reach our communities of fans all across the world.
Some of the authors for Assassin's Creed stories are pretty big names. Are we still able to incorporate more regional voices into the narratives?
Well, of course, there is room for local talents, and we try to integrate as much of them as we can within this transmedia program. I can give you 3 examples of projects that are initiated with local talents. First, we will launch our first original webtoon in South Korea along with Red Ice, a South Korean company specializing in that specific genre. They are currently hard at work developing, along with Korean writers, Korean artists, this sequel to Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which
Oh, la
will
secuela de
expand
Black
Edward
Flag.
Kenway's storyline, exploring his further adventures in the Pacific Area.
Pero...
Then we have our Chinese collection of novels called the Imperial Jade Seal Collection. Through this collection of 10 novels, we will explore several
10 novelas, tío.
Chinese dynasties, thanks to the work of 5 Chinese writers who specialize in historical novels.
Bueno,
Finally,
que
I
hacer
can
un juego
also
supongo que es muy
mention
complicado.
a manga
Mejor hacer 10 novelas.
in Japan along with Shogakukan. It's called Blade of Shaojun, and it was designed by Minoji Kurata, a Japanese mangaka who also specializes in historical fiction and had a voice of her own to retell the story of Shaojun and to link it with a modern day storyline involving a Japanese.
Hacen que el cómic de Shaojun tiene
So, if
historia
you want to
moderna,
know
tú.
more about
Como un
this
juego.
specific manga, we have a short documentary about its artist that we will display just now so that you can get to know her a bit better.
ともともと4年前ぐらいからそのゲームをやるようになって、で特に朝栗は好きだったので、ちょっと担当さんとかにもいろいろ話をしていて、でそれがあったから
Bueno,
こう
empiezan
朝栗の
con
探
Origins.
す
Está bien.
探せるっていう時に名前を
Ah,
挙げていただいて、
y supongo que ahora tendrán Valhalla, ¿no?
もう最初はあまりこういや私ではちょっとみたいなふうに思って、ネームだけならとかそういうふうな話はしてたんですけど、でもせっかくだったら自分で書きたいと思って、それで、全部ネームから作画まで担当させてもらうことになりました。
Es curioso que diga que es súper fan de Assassin's Creed cuando en Japón Assassin's Creed no suele ser, tío, muy conocido, ¿sabes? No es que sea su principal campo, al menos.
ファンじゃない方にも読んでそこから入ってもらいたいっていうのもあったんで、だからそのちゃんとゲームの背景とかなんか設定とかをきちんと説明するのはちゃんと入れようと思って、であとゲームの方クロニクルチャイナだけだとそのシャオユンの話だけなんですけど、本来多分未来の誰かが先祖の記憶を追体験してるっていうのがベースにあるので、現代編はちゃんと入れたいなと思って、そこは入れられるように考えました。
Bueno.
そちらの方でそのクロニクルチャイナにはない要素とか、あとその現代の教団と騎士団の戦いについてとか、そういうのは現代編の方で入れようとしています。
Bueno, a ver, vale. Es que mi problema, tío, con esto es que si solo se ha jugado al Chronicle China, pues no sé. Se está saltando todo, ¿sabes? O sea, se ha jugado al Chronicle China y Assassin's Creed 2 para incluir el tiempo moderno, pues vale, sí. Sin más. Puntos suspensivos.
朝栗はその戦うことよりもやっぱり隠れて動いたりとかそういうところの方が
¿Son cosas mías o no han mostrado su cara aún? O sea, en
それ
plan,
ばっかりになるとちょっと漫画としては
no queremos saber quién es.
思ったので
Su cara
ちょっとあえて戦うシーンを
pixelada, que no se vea, ¿no?
入れたりと
Qué
か
raro es eso.
そういうところで視覚的に面白い要素をなるべく多く入れようとはしています。まずは読みやすいっていうところを一番気にはしてるんですけど、やっぱりこうテンポが悪かったりとか、なんかこうセリフが入りづらかったりっていうと、多分そこでもう読むのをやめてしまう人も多い媒体だと思うんですよね、漫画って。なんかこう流し読みもできるけど、流し読んで記憶に残るかどうかってやっぱその話がきちんと入ってくるかによると思うので、そこが一番漫画家としては気にして書いてるところです。自分の好きな世界とかそういうのをこう誰かに分かってもらいたいみたいな感じで書いているので、それでこうその世界観だとかその設定だとかを好きになってくれる人が増えたら嬉しいし、なんか私もそういうなんか何かのきっかけになれたらいいなと思いながら書いてます。
Está guay.
And so I see
Dibuja
some
de
of the
bien.
content on the
Me ha
Assassin's Creed
gustado.
Stories website has these labels like Chronicles, Classics, Originals. Can you explain what those mean?
Yes, of course. Well, as you know, we have more and more fiction developed within the Assassin's Creed universe, more and more stories that are intertwined, and we can understand that at some point for our fans it's not that easy to understand when they pick up a book, when they pick up a manga, what kind of story they will read in this book. So we designed these 3 labels in order for them to be able to better navigate our collections. The first of these labels is called Classics. Classics are direct adaptation of the storylines of the games. We took the script of the game and we turned it into a novel, a manga, a graphic novel. That's an amazing opportunity for fans to live once again the story of this game that they loved, but through the very specific lens of a writer, an illustrator who gives his or her take on this story. Then we have the Chronicles. We know that some of our characters were fan favorites, and we know that many fans want to learn more about their favorite characters. So Chronicles are often prequels, sequels, excellent opportunities to expand the life of one of our heroes, to give more information about him or her, more background. So these are what Chronicles stories are for. And finally, we have the originals. Originals are very important when it comes to Assassin's Creed transmedia developments, because Assassin's Creed tells us basically the history of humanity, and there are many settings, many eras that are so interesting to explore through books, through mangas, through comics. We take this opportunity within the transmedia program and we create these original stories with brand new heroes that we know that our fans will love. So thanks to these 3 labels, Classics, Chronicles, Originals, we are now certain that our fans will know exactly what kind of story to expect when they delve into a new transmedia project.
Thank you. Thank you, Etienne, for taking the time to explain kind of the broad strokes of Assassin's Creed Stories.
Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure.
Next up, we've got Amar Azazia, one of the directors on the various AC Stories transmedia content. Amar, what exactly does that fancy title entail?
Creo que este es de los
Hey,
clásicos.
yeah, I know it's kind of a weird title, and I've got like the hugest business card of the whole industry. But the thing I'm usually working on are everything that is beyond the realm of pure gaming, which means in the case of Assassin's Creed, we're talking about the movie, the TV series with Netflix, animation show, like every single pieces of narrative content that is getting outside of the realm of just the game, and also side to that, it's all the cool goodies and toys that you can see like here that I'm working on that fans really love.
So a common question that whenever
Se lo ve
new media gets
interesante.
involved, whenever new Assassin's Creed stories or TV shows get involved in the overall continuity, the main question that a lot of players will end up having is where do these new pieces of content fit into the overall continuity of Assassin's Creed?
Yeah, by continuity, usually the question we've got is about the pieces of content being canonical or not. Like that's kind of the huge question.
Ojo.
Like, is it part of
Ya empezamos.
something that will have
¿Puedo creer
impact
historias sean
on the games
canónicas o
or
no?
narrative
Ojo.
overall, or is it something that is self-contained? And it's definitely a case-by-case scenario, depending on like the partnership, the media, what we're doing. I would say that roughly the vast majority of the content that we've been working on is a part of the Assassin's Creed mythos. Like it's all part of the same universe. So whether it's gonna act as a prequel to a game or something else that's just gonna add like more content to the overall Assassin's Creed mythos and story. But the how do we take this decision is depending on the partner and how evolved they are, I would say development schedule. Like sometimes schedules kind of overlap, and it's quite hard to take.
Por ahora está
all of them
haciendo un
into
poco
account
meh,
where
¿eh?
we're still developing a game,
La verdad.
and we need to add more stuff.
Es
So
como
we got an expertise, and usually we're
podrían
really cautious.
hacerlo
So if
más
it's something
dinámico,
we
¿sabes?
develop to a game, we take our time, we work with the team. We have like the different people working on the franchise all together in order to take this decision. And the other way we do it is we basically develop something that is not touching the direct narrative of the upcoming game. Like in the case of Valhalla, we can have a story that is going to be told in China, and it won't have any direct impact on the franchise. So that's a way that we can all keep our sanity while working on things that make sense and
Yeah,
are
for
part
sure.
of content.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? If the next game is looking like it's taking place in Norway and England, then going to the opposite side of the globe is a good way to make sure that you're not risking anything with regards to kind of overlapping stories. And then, so when it comes to kind of, you had mentioned that you're working with a lot of internal and external partners. What is the process exactly for balancing out working with those different partners while constantly broadening the Assassin's Creed world? Because you're not just talking to only people who are working on all the same things. Talking to people who are working on a novel that's taking place in China, a game that's taking place in Norway, and all these different partners.
So when it's not connected directly to a game, usually what we're doing is we have our brand team and the transmedia team that is responsible for overseeing all the development of this different products and projects that we have. So we know the franchise, we know what we want to do, we know what we want to achieve, and we are the one taking the decision and coordinating all of this effort. When it's closer to a game or it's directly connected to a game like the Dark Horse comics that we have, or the novel from Matt Kirby that has been released that is like tapping directly into AC Valhalla, then what we're doing is and it will
O sea,
world before
básicamente nos está diciendo lo que todos sabemos, que algunas cosas, algunas historias no están conectadas, pero hay otras que sí, como por ejemplo los cómics de Assassin's Creed de Assassin's Creed creo que son Templars con Valhalla, y es como, oh, de Dark Horse, oh, vaya, no lo sabía.
Writers coming to the studio, and we spend a couple of days with them. So when I say we, I mean the transmedia team, but also their team. So for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it was the creative director, narrative director, and we're overseeing the whole development.
Mira, yo lo siento, pero con Valhalla hicieron ahí un batiburrillo ahí de malo, ¿sabes? O sea, el director creativo y el narrador creativo para sentirse orgulloso precisamente no es, ¿sabes? Podría gustarte más o menos el juego, pero como Assassin's Creed deja mucho que desear.
But if it's connected to a world, we need to get sure that everything's work at least as well or as elegantly, I would say, as possible. So for the case of Dark Horse, we decided that having a prequel to the game would be very interesting into digging into some other characters.
Me encanta, por cierto, que unos cómics que ni se molestan en traerlos doblados o traducidos en su gran mayoría digan que es súper interesante, ¿sabes?
So of course, narrative director was involved, creative director was involved, because we don't want to take them off guard, say something that would break continuity. So it's very important to have that collaboration, and we try to do it as early on as possible. That way,
Pero yo digo, si están
shipping a good game, and we can focus on delivering a kick-ass story.
Si es tan importante lo de colaborar y que todo esté conectado y todo el rollo, ¿por qué cojones hacéis cada uno lo que os sale de las narices? Es que no lo entiendo. Te están cerrando aquí es que es súper importante que colaboremos, que las historias comparten un universo, y luego cada uno hace lo que le sale de las narices. Ejemplo, Origins y los cómics de Origins que cambian el final, ¿sabes? Eso no es tener una colaboración. La verdad. Siento ser claro, pero es que es verdad.
It's a very good question. It's something that fans are usually asking themselves. They're like, I really love that story and I would love to see it in a game. The question has been brought quite a couple of times. In fact, it's very different to work on a game or TV series because the constraint itself is completely different. Like on a comic books, we can have fun by having our character travel to the world. They can be in Constantinople and then in Norway, but building that in a game is huge. So it's not. Or on the set for a TV series, we have the exactly same problem. We're like, oh yeah, we want to, explore different time periods. It's like, yeah, we're gonna have to pay for that. So it's a bit more complicated, but it's definitely interesting to see that they fell in love with those characters that we've created, and we've seen, in fact, a lot of them having, I would say, a more complex career than what was expected at first. Like Otsoberg was first created as a character in the multiplayer of Assassin's Creed, but you didn't see the face of Otso, you just hear his voice. And then through Transmedia, with Initiate Comics, define him by giving him a face, an attitude, a story, and then he came back in the game with the design we created. So it was kind of a super positive emulation. And some characters like Daniel Cross were created in the graphic novel and then play quite a significant role in the game themselves. So that kind of things happen, I would say, quite a lot.
Este tío controla. O sea, los de Oxover, que creó el multiplayer de Assassin's Creed, solo se lo he escuchado a esta persona en todos los años que llevo jugando a Assassin's Creed. Y mira que eso es una de esas cosas que, vale, lo sabes, pero se te olvida. A mí se me había olvidado por completo. De hecho, salen los de Oxover, que es el creador del multiplayer de Assassin's Creed, sale en el 3, creo recordar.
That wraps up our preliminary discussion. Now we get the chance to dive in and talk a little bit more shop with some of the editors and authors themselves.
Panel. What?
It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our panel for today. Robin Jolly, editor of the French graphic novel over at Glénat. Freddie Miller, editor of the Song of Glory graphic novel. Gwen Nix, editor of the Ming Storm novel, as well as the editor of a brand new Valhalla novel. Elsa Hunison, the writer of that new Valhalla novel, as well as numerous short fiction works and several books. And Olivier Gay, a writer of one of the new AC Fragments young adult novels.
Me interesa Fragment y es lo último que van a hablar.
Robin, Freddie, you're both editors on these different novels. Could you just very quick give yourselves an introduction for everyone else who's just now seeing you for the first time?
Hi, I'm Freddie Miller. I'm an editor at Dark Horse Comics. We have been, we're a U.S. publisher. We've been publishing comics since 1986. Some titles you might be familiar with from Dark Horse are Sin City, Hellboy, The Mask. In recent times, The Umbrella Academy, Resident Alien. I work on a lot of our licensed titles here. So I work on our full line of Ubisoft comics, including Assassin's Creed.
Podrían haberle comprado una cámara en condiciones. Digo yo, vamos, que sigamos así después de un año de pandemia.
Robin Jolly, and first of all, I apologize for my very, very French accent. I'm I'm editor at Glénat, which is one of the main publisher of comic books in France. We do like mangas like One Piece, Dragon Ball,
Este controla de Dragon
small
Ball,
books
de One
like
Piece.
stuff, and obviously comic books about Ubisoft universe, which we are talking here.
So you know, some titles that maybe some people have heard of. Could you both explain for a layman like myself what exactly it is an editor does for a story like this, and what's like the impact of your work that someone could easily see?
I guess you could sum up our work as the one of producer for music or movies. Regarding our Assassin's Creed Valhalla graphic novel at Glénat, the first job was to find a great team of authors to make a book about Assassin's Creed. Then we give them creative support to improve their story, their art. We make the connection between artists and the team of Ubisoft with the big help of Etienne. And our marketing, sales, communication department. Then we finalize the stuff, we correct if there is any mistake, and we check with the printer to get a beautiful book.
I would agree with all of that. I kind of tend to I tend to refer to my job as that of a project manager. You know, keeping things on time, putting together the team, keeping to a
Esta mujer, tío, habla como muy rosa, ¿sabes? Como muy en los puntos de Yuppie, tío. Curioso.
We work with design for the cover and the interiors and all that.
Wow, it sounds like both of you are wearing a lot of different hats on a day-to-day basis. Since you're working with something directly connected to an existing game, how do you incorporate different visual elements from a video game into such a different medium, such as graphic novels?
That's where the collaboration with Etienne and the Ubisoft team becomes very important. As you said, Assassin's Creed Valhalla has an existing universe, and a huge one. So the authors and us need to focus on how they can tell the story they want and respect this universe, its visual identity as well as its key elements. And for this, every aspect, from the development of the script to the ties shape of a church roof in the book, is constantly examined by the teams of Ubisoft. That's a lot of things we keep in mind, including the most important one, which is making a great book.
Yeah, I would say we have to dive completely into the world that's been developed. It's a huge, rich world that's already being developed or has been developed for the game. And so we need completely go into that, and we also receive a lot of references. So myself and our teams need to.
Por cierto, en todo el juego hemos visto una lluvia de estas. Solo en una escena, tío. Al inicio. O más o menos al inicio.
How did the particular artistic vision and artistic team for these respective works come to be?
Me encantaba como decían eso de en Valhalla tendremos peleas de barcos, aunque no será tampoco lo habitual. Ni una pelea de barco.
But with the qualities that fit with the spirit of the game. That's why we asked Mathieu Gabella, who is our writer, and who likes to do stories with very great historical.
Esto ocurre en Francia, si no recuerdo mal.
Speak with you about history during hours. And the artist Paolo Tresci did with us an adaptation of Jack Vance's Demon Princes, which is a sci-fi saga with a lot of epicness, and this is the epicness we want to make Assassin's Creed book. So together they will take us to the beautiful landscape of Scotland in an adventure that involves assassins, Vikings, monks, sacred books, and mysterious legends, which sounds like kind of Assassin's Creed's DNA.
Me encanta lo que acabo de decir, que Assassin's Creed Valhalla tiene el ADN de Assassin's Creed. Este mola.
In Cavan's case in particular, he is a big fan of Viking stories, and the Viking Age is a favorite.
Hicieron a Ivor como demasiado flaca, ¿no? No sé, yo recuerdo a Ivor y es un bicharraco, sea el que sea, masculino o femenino.
Universe into his own particular style very well, showing violence, realism, action, and paying really close attention to all that reference.
Absolutely. And so where do you as editors, or as you said, project managers, kind of fall into the dynamic between writers and illustrators as the story is being constructed from the ground up?
Well, of course, we are not the authors. It remains their story, but we are the first readers. We can give them feedback if some things don't work or seem not clear enough for us and possibly to the readers. But we can also suggest things. For example, I remember that really wanted to see the islands drawn by Paolo, so the background of Scotland was kind of choice of mine. But mostly we are here to help them if they have any question, doubts, or concerns regarding the respect of the game and the relevance of their story.
We help guide our team through the development, and we remain like a contact between them and the folks at Ubisoft if they don't happen to have direct contact all the time, pulling reference for them or being a first set of eyes on their work to give feedback.
So, video games and graphic novels, obviously two very different experiences, right? What what are some of the advantages or disadvantages in your experience of using a more 2D medium? Do games and graphic novels play off of each other in ways that the average reader might not expect?
Well, obviously, as you say, it's two different mediums, so we can't play with the same objectives. The main issue is the time. Video games like Assassin's Creed give dozens, even in hundreds of hours of experience to
Te
the
digo lo que
players.
pienso, me
We
cierran
might
el
have
vídeo ahora, tío, porque
20
estoy no
pages, so we
indignado,
need to focus on
evidentemente,
what makes the game or
pero
the
sí
comic
estoy
narrative, which is
bastante
graphics
porque
and
lo que me están
image.
enseñando, vale,
As
muy
Captain
guay,
MacLeod said,
pero no hay nada Assassin's Creed,
art of the
seguimos en la
invisible,
misma.
and is still, in my opinion, one of the best
No hay
ways to tell a
encapuchados,
story and stimulate readers' imagination,
no
as well as
hay
to give
nada
them
Assassin's Creed.
time images that will stop them and blow their minds.
What?
So, for this, as you will see right after, I can say that
La has
Paolo seems
liado.
to be a pretty good choice.
I think that comics give
Toma ahí y
fans
si os ha grabado
the opportunity
liada
to
master que se ha marcado.
take as much time as they want with moments with characters. You know, if you have an action scene in the game, it's going very quickly, but in a comic, you can stop and really see all the details. And one of our goals in the comics is to add to the richness.
Se ha parado y todo mientras hablaba porque estaba viendo una cosa rara ahí y ha seguido, ¿sabes? Cuando le han dado
Well, thank you
el
both
verde
so
le han
much for
dicho,
your time
continúa,
and
continúa,
insight
que ahora lo
into
quito.
into the editorial headspace. We'll have a quick time lapse drawing by Paolo before we jump right into our next session.
Está muy guay el label, tío, del cómic. Pero no me acaba de convencer del todo, la verdad, el cómic. Valhalla Novel, vaya. La novela.
I'm now joined by Gwen Nix and Elsa Hunison, the editor and writer
Mira, esta está
respectively of the
sonriente.
brand
Así es como se tiene que hacer una presentación. Como la muchacha, como la de la... No, como esa no, como la otra.
Short fiction published in Uncanny Magazine, Fireside Magazine, and the upcoming Mermaids Monthly. And I have a memoir coming out in fall of 2021 about disability in media. It's called Being Seen, One Deafblind Woman's Fight to End Ableism. I've been working in media tie-in for the last 5 years, including Jessica Jones playing with fire from Cereal Box, and I just had a Peggy Carter comic come out in the Women of Marvel anthology. So that's kind of what I do.
Bueno, se nota que es una fricasa como yo.
And jump from genre to genre a little bit like an assassin.
And I'm Gwen Nix. I am an editor with Aconite Books. Aconite Books is the fictional imprint for the games group Asmodee, and our whole goal is to create world-expanding fiction. We write tie-in fiction for the Marvel Universe, a lot of Ubisoft properties, Legend of the Five
Todos
Flames,
se inspiran en Marvel.
Open
Oh,
to it.
vaya por
I
Dios.
have to ask, how do you first dive into creating a novel for a game that was, at least when you first started writing, still in production?
So for on the editorial side and like the production side, to create a novel idea while a game is in production takes just a ton of communication and collaboration. Essentially, we have to think of these worlds mentally as if they're real. We have to understand, you know, the person, places, and things that will affect the events of the game, how those things are going to look at the end of the game, kind of see into the future with our glass eyes and our future crystal balls to see what might potentially be a good game in the future. And then really just look for those unresolved and uncovered niches that are really strong with storytelling and that we can feed into the greater narrative.
I mean, it's funny. I'm still finishing playing Valhalla right now, so it's been sort of like, oh look, I now need to dive into this world very, very quickly and not slow down my playthrough at all. For me, like learning the game, sort of learning what the game is doing while I'm also thinking about how to outline.
Se le nota que esa es una fricasa, ¿sabes? Que le emociona las cosas y que está ahí con ganas, ¿sabes?
Being a Valhalla novel.
Bueno, si has jugado Valhalla, pues supongo que podrá ser una novela, digo yo.
As well as some new names. What, or I guess better yet, who can Valhalla fans expect to see more of in the new novel that they have already perhaps met?
Well, I can't tell you too much because if I do, I'm going to need to call up the current Assassin's Bureau and send them your way. But I can tell you that Valka will be making an appearance, as will
Valka, Vulka lo dicen en inglés. Hostia, tuve la traducción. Y mira que es un nombre que ya de por sí es vikingo, es nórdico, o sea que no hace falta traducirlo. Vulka.
Yeah, and thematically, we're really looking at how the Vikings influenced a lot of popular lores and legends that are beloved in that area at the time. So we're also, as Elsa had already said, we're bringing in popular in-game characters. We're also going to have some in-game characters that are cameoed, and then, as she had mentioned, some new familiar faces that we hope that fans will love.
Also, you had mentioned that Hytham is going to be in the novel, and so what is it like playing through the game, seeing the character that you're also writing for at the same time, and like what does that feel like to know that you are in some way shaping this character in the novel versus how you are already seeing them in the game?
It's funny, this is not my first time doing a tie-in project, and so every time I get to sort of touch a character who's already been established, it's like I get to play in somebody else's sandbox. I get to add to the story. So it feels very collaborative, to be honest with you. It's like I get to see what people did in the video.
Pobre Ethan, incluso en la novela lo mantienen tú como un colaborativo, ¿sabes?
Exciting for me both as a fan of the Assassin's Creed games for a long time and also as an author who really enjoys getting to explore these sandboxes.
Yeah, and for me, it's just like I love seeing what Elsa creates in this world. Like she has so many unique new ideas that I'm just like, oh my goodness, everyone's gonna love that, or I love that. I can't wait to read this book. So not only am I excited as an editor, I'm also excited as a Assassin's Creed fan as well. So it's very exciting for me.
And how is the writing going now? When can readers expect to pick up the new novel?
Well, I'm writing, and it's going well. It's been good to get back to fencing lessons because I need to revisit my sword skills. After all, I am writing people whacking people with swords.
Yes, of course.
So I am in the fencing studio. But I also can't give you a totally clear date. I will say that it will show up somewhere in your hands in 2022. And by then I will have been fencing for a year and I can show off some of my skills while I'm holding a book in my hand.
And
en 2022 parece ser.
I've been told that you have an entire program pretty much dedicated to AC novels. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yes, Aconite Books has a very robust Assassin's Creed program in the lineup. We were the publishers and the US publishers for the Garabin Saga novel, which just recently came out. We are also going to be doing a loose linked trilogy in the Valhalla universe, so you'll definitely be seeing more books coming from us in the future. And then we're also continuing the Ming Storm trilogy, which is going to be an original strand in the Assassin's Creed universe. As for other stuff, the Assassin's Creed universe is so vast, like you're definitely going to be having a lot of new books coming to you and to join the other books on your shelf.
Al principio me caía mejor esta porque realmente empieza con una sonrisa, que la otra empezó un poco seria, ¿no? O sea, la de primero blanquita empezó, pero conforme iba hablando se nota que la de aquí al lado, la de las gafitas, tiene bastante más, entiende bastante más y pilota bastante más, pero vamos, solo por la forma en la que habla, ¿sabes? Ya uno lo notas.
This has been extremely eye-opening, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Al fin, Fragment, lo que yo espero. Hostia. Este está Sadness, está medio gris. Pero esta gente no tienen iPhones, tío. ¿Cómo están grabando así, tú? Parece un móvil del 2002.
I also sell my soul to a lot of studios, adapting television series like The Loud House, Jurassic World, comics like Asterix. And I
Mira, le
also
gusta
develop video
Asterix.
games, both for
Asterio
fun
BD
and of
es
course
una
for
gran
competition
serie.
is among my favorites.
Si escuché a,
Because
a
when
los
I
perros,
spend days
perdonad.
with
O
someone,
sea, esos son los
I
perros del
also
vecino que
become
no se
very
callan.
strong. So when Ubisoft called me and told me I could go wilder than universe, I kind of, felt all warm and fuzzy inside. And besides, when they told me I could write about Japan, I was like so excited because, like, I just learned 20 minutes ago when you spoke with the editor in Montreal that they are doing Legend of the Five Rings, and it's a role-playing game that is set in Japan, in Rokugan. And I mean, I play a lot of it with my friends. I have lots of books, so in some way, I'm already paying Ubisoft. I'm paying them back. But yeah, I was very, very excited when they called me.
What exactly is Assassin's Creed Fragments?
Well,
Considero esta es la mejor apuesta que tiene todos los Assassin's Creed Fragments.
At edition 404, so it's 404, like the famous computer era. So it's 3 different writers, 3 different settings, and what's connecting them is all those books have siblings, and also like all those books are great. The first one is mine, and so it's
La
set
portada es
in medieval
flipante,
Japan,
tío.
in 1868, at the time where the Edo era will
Y yo
end
diciendo que era un
and the Meiji
nativo.
era will start.
Y era en la era Edo.
The second
En Japón,
book
vamos.
is set in the Highlands, where if you've seen the movie Braveheart, you'll know what I'll be talking about, what I'm talking about. And well, the last one is set in South France during the Inquisition, where a lot of witches were burnt.
What makes this series of books different from a more classic novelization?
Well, I kind of felt my life was on the line. I mean, this is Assassin's Creed we're talking about. I'm a big fan, so I don't want to mess up. But that's not the most important. The most important thing is the fans don't want me to mess up. There's a huge fan base.
Acabo de decir que la historia de Assassin's Creed no es importante y que lo que importa son los fans.
Whether I mess up or not, whether I get my facts right or not. And I mean, when I do an ego search and I write the name of the book, I find, websites in all kind of languages, some in Japanese, some in Portuguese, and they are all, comparing facts and saying, oh, I hope it will be good. And I say, yeah, I hope it will be good as well. And also, there's also a lot of pressure because I chose medieval Japan as a setting, and it's a very, very popular setting. I mean, a lot of people are reading, comic books, mangas. I've seen movies about medieval Japan, and they aren't as forgiving as they would be for other time periods. When you want to do it, you have to do it right. So, well, I hope I did it right.
Awesome. And what was some of your inspiration behind picking medieval Japan as a setting, both the time period and the place?
Well, I'm a big fan of the romanticized view of medieval Japan. I mean, when I say romanticized,
La más cerca que vamos a tener de un juego en Japón medieval.
You see in video games, you see in comic books or movies, like The Last Samurai, or when I was younger, I was a big fan of Rurouni Kenshin. I don't know how you say it in English. But, ninjas vanishing into thin air, Shugenja casting spells, samurai battling with the light of dawn and stuff like this. I mean, it's the stuff of legends, and it's very, very interesting to recreate it for me. And it was even more interesting to recreate it with all this, game-ish and fantasy-ish stuff, but in a real time period with real people, real characters who existed. And the never-ending war between Templars and Assassins taking place at the beginning of the Meiji era.
So the Assassin's Creed games are about a lot of things, themes of family, legacy, freedom, as well as many other things, of course. And so how do the novels and how do your novels explore similar themes as the games, or perhaps branch off into new territory?
Yeah, well, it wasn't that hard actually, because all the themes you called are themes that are very common to humankind. I mean, every legend we talked about, even before books, when people talked about legends around campfires, It was, about tales of family, tales of heroism, tales of freedom, and it's surprisingly vivid in whole humankind history. And so when I wrote this novel, it was even, I mean, the hard part wasn't this. It was, putting it in perspective so it could be as good as other
Mucho sale,
things
tío, y
that
poco
are,
de demostración. Por cierto,
Assassin's Creed.
han hablado, ¿no? De Black Flag.
So, while you've been writing, what have been some of the difficulties and surprises, or even sacrifices of turning a historically adult franchise into something more geared towards a young adult audience?
Well, surprisingly little. I mean, we reviewed the plot, of course, with the
O sea, que lo de
Ubisoft,
adulto,
they were
literal.
pleased with it, so thank you, Ubisoft. And they let me totally free to write what I wanted.
Una saga de Assassin's Creed que es más 18, toda entera, ¿sabes? Bueno, creo que el primero no. Sí, sí, todos son más 18.
When I write for them, I don't censor myself. There's some graphic violence in the book. I mean, it's about samurais fighting, so there are, of course, some beheading involved. And at what times the heroine is pretty embarrassed at having other soldiers pissing in front of her. So, I mean, there are a lot of themes that can be seen as adults, but young adults can totally read it. And not everything is peachy. Some characters may not survive the ride, and that's what's interesting about.
Okay, yeah, that sounds extremely exciting, actually. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Because of soldiers pissing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, that's the one. That's what was the deal breaker for me. Thank you so much for indulging the young adult and Assassin's Creed nerds within me, Olivier. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, likewise.
And one last thank you to all of our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye
Bye.
then. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. That's all for the show today, but definitely be
Pues
sure to
parece que
check
se ha
out
sido
some of
todo.
the work shown and covered here if you haven't already.
Bueno,
Thanks again for watching, and have a great rest of your day.
a ver. Por un lado me gusta, está interesante. He visto bastantes cosas que me han gustado, pero hay algo que no... que mi ser de fan interior expulsa, y es que lo que yo he visto no han sido fans de Assassin's Creed intentando hacer una historia de Assassin's Creed. He visto empresarios, cada uno en sus profesiones, pagados por Ubisoft, haciendo historias de una cosa que no entienden en su gran mayoría, porque quitando 3, los demás no he visto yo que sea un entendimiento de las... O sea, hay uno que literalmente ha dicho que la historia en Assassin's Creed no es importante, o sea, la historia real, que no es importante, que lo que importa son lo que le gustan a los fans, y es como... Bueno, vale, no vale, no. O sea, se ha parado esto. Esto como se ha parado, voy a poner mi cámara grande. En fin, sinceramente, no sé qué pensar de esto, o sea... Me esperaba que esto, como he dicho al principio, no iba a ser tampoco... No te iba a hablar aquí de Basim, porque eso es de la historia principal. No te iba a hablar de cosas principales en este evento, te iban a hablar de cosas secundarias. Pero yo esperaba que de esas cosas secundarias al menos tuviera un poco de fluidez. Pero es que el stream, o sea, todo lo que es el live stream este que han hecho ha sido demasiado pesado, lo han compaginado fatal y han ido saltando en vez de hacerlo. En vez de coger y hacerlo, por ejemplo, por orden de lanzamiento del juego, las historias que tengan que ver se acercan a Assassin's Creed 1, Assassin's Creed 2, la ponen. Las que tengan que ver cercanas a Black Flag, la ponen. Luego Valhalla, luego... Y al menos tienen un orden, o por importancia, lo que sería más importante primero, y luego lo que no tiene tanta importancia, que puede ser de historias más conocidas al final. Pero le han hecho un batiburrillo raro que no entiendo muy bien. Encima ha sido grabado porque ha habido cortes que podrían haberlo cogido y podrían haberlo montado bastante mejor. Pero son este tipo de esto. Yo creo que si Ubisoft va a intentar hacer que eso del universo expandido, o mejor dicho, Assassin's Creed Stories, sea más interesante o sea más importante, se tiene que curar más este tipo de cosas y tiene que empezar a marcar más las cosas, porque no me sirve de que me des una imagen de empresa multitrending, ¿no? Que es de Ubisoft, o sea, Assassin's Creed ya no es solo los juegos. Los juegos, Ubisoft original, Classic, Chronicles, esto, lo otro, si luego me vas a coger y no te vas a tomar en serio el stream y no lo vas a montar en serio. Pero bueno, me voy a hacer un bollo porque tengo hambre, esto ya ha acabado. Ha tardado más o menos una hora, lo que más o menos me esperaba. Subiré este vídeo, si estáis viendo este vídeo el jueves es que lo he conseguido, si lo estáis viendo más tarde, pues es que no se ha podido subir. No creo sinceramente que me molesten hacerle ninguna portada porque no tiene sentido un stream, un vídeo tan largo, porque este vídeo sé de sobra que solo lo va a ver el 30% o el 20% de la gente que me sigue. Si resulta que más gente lo ve, pues mejor. Si no, pues bueno. Muchas gracias a todos, queridos. Ayudadme a llegar a los 500 suscriptores, una hora de vídeo, casi mucho que no subía tantos, pero puedo subirlo sin problemas. Muchas gracias, dejadme un like, un comentario y todo lo que queráis sobre este gran stream. Espero que os haya gustado más que a mí, porque a mí sinceramente le pongo un 5 de 9. Pero bueno, la paz con ustedes, hermanos. Hasta luego.